The alien commanders had studied human soldiers for decades. They knew about their weapons, their tactics, and their strange tendency to fight even when victory seemed impossible. But they had never seen anything like Sergeant Marcus Draven. Standing at nearly 7 feet tall with muscles that looked carved from stone, he was already a frightening sight before the battle even began. The Vexari Empire had invaded the mining colony on Titan VII with overwhelming force. Their reptilian soldiers numbered in the thousands, each one armed with plasma rifles and protected by energy shields. The human defenders were only 300, trapped in a facility with failing life support and dwindling ammunition. Command had written them off as acceptable losses. Rescue ships would not arrive for another 16 hours, and everyone knew they would not last that long. Marcus watched from the observation deck as the Vexari forces assembled outside the main gate. His squad stood behind him, their faces pale with fear. Private Chun was barely 20 years old, and her hand shook as she checked a rifle for the 5th time. Corporal Williams had been wounded in the first attack, and blood still leaked through the bandage on his arm. They were not warriors. They were miners and technicians who had picked up weapons when the invasion began. The facility commander appeared on the communication screen. His voice was calm, but Marcus could see the defeat in his eyes. "We have received no response from Fleet Command," he said. "We are on our own. I want every able-bodied person to fall back to the secondary shelter. We will hold there as long as we can." Marcus did not respond. He was looking at something else entirely. On the far side of the enemy formation, he could see a group of Vexari soldiers dragging human prisoners toward a transport ship. Among them were children from the colony's school. Their small faces were twisted with terror as the alien soldiers pushed them forward with electric prods. Something changed inside Marcus at that moment. A darkness that he had kept locked away for years began to stir. He had felt this sensation before, during the Battle of New Singapore, when his entire platoon had been wiped out by Vexari ambush. He had been the only survivor, and the medical reports afterward described what happened as combat-induced dissociative fury. The doctors had given it a clinical name, but the soldiers who had witnessed it called it something else. They called it the Rage. "Sergeant Draven, did you hear the order?" Private Chun asked nervously. "We need to fall back to the shelter." Marcus turned to face his squad. His eyes had changed. The brown color seemed darker now, almost black, and there was something burning behind them that made Chun take an involuntary step backward. When he spoke, his voice was different. It was lower, rougher, like the growl of some ancient predator. "You take the squad to the shelter," he said. "I am going outside." Corporal Williams grabbed his arm. "That's suicide. There are thousands of them out there." Marcus did not remove the hand. He simply looked at Williams with those terrible eyes until the corporal let go on his own. "There are children out there," Marcus said. "Human children. And I am going to bring them back." He walked to the equipment locker and began to prepare himself. He removed his standard combat armor and replaced it with something older, something that had been banned by military regulations years ago. It was a prototype exoskeleton called the Berserker frame, designed to enhance human strength and aggression to superhuman levels. The technology worked, but it had been discontinued because the psychological effects were too extreme. Soldiers who used it often lost themselves completely to violence. Marcus did not care. He locked the frame around his body and felt the neural connections click into place. Immediately, he could feel the artificial adrenaline flooding his system. His muscles swelled against the metal frame, and his heart began to pound like a war drum. The Rage was fully awake now, and it was hungry. He picked up his weapons. In his right hand, he held a modified plasma blade that could cut through Vexari armor like paper. In his left, he carried a heavy assault cannon that most soldiers needed 2 hands to lift. Grenades hung from his belt, and a combat knife was strapped to his thigh. He was not going out there to win a battle. He was going out there to unleash destruction. The main gate opened, and Marcus stepped into the red light of Titan VII's dying sun. The Vexury forces saw him immediately. A single human soldier walking toward an army of thousands. Their commander laughed through his translator device, a wet, gurgling sound that echoed across the battlefield. "One human thinks he can challenge the Vexury Empire," the commander announced to his troops. "Kill him slowly? Let the others watch and lose hope." 100 Vexury soldiers raised their plasma rifles and fired. The air filled with deadly green light. Marcus did not dodge or seek cover. He simply charged forward, and the Berserker frame's energy shield absorbed the first wave of shots. Then he was among them. The first Vexury soldier died before he even understood what was happening. Marcus swung his plasma blade in a horizontal arc that cut through 3 enemies at once. Their bodies fell in pieces, and hot alien blood sprayed across his armor. He did not stop. He could not stop. The rage had complete control now, and it demanded more. He moved through the enemy formation like a storm of death. The assault cannon roared in his left hand, sending explosive rounds into clusters of Vexury soldiers. Bodies flew through the air, torn apart by the devastating impacts. His blade flashed again and again, cutting through armor and flesh with equal ease. The aliens tried to form defensive lines, but Marcus crashed through them like they were made of paper. A Vexury officer attempted to rally his troops. "Concentrate fire on the human. Bring him down." Dozens of plasma bolts struck Marcus simultaneously. His shield finally failed, and he felt burning pain as several shots penetrated his armor. Blood ran down his chest and arms, but the Berserker frame pumped more chemicals into his system, blocking the pain and pushing his body beyond its natural limits. He was wounded, but he did not slow down. If anything, he moved faster. He grabbed a Vexury soldier by the throat and lifted him off the ground with one hand. The alien's eyes bulged with terror as Marcus squeezed, crushing his windpipe like an empty can. Then he threw the body into a group of approaching enemies, knocking them down like bowling pins. His cannon fired again, and another dozen soldiers disappeared in a cloud of fire and smoke. The Vexury had never experienced anything like this. In all their centuries of conquest, they had never seen a single warrior cause so much destruction. They were used to human soldiers who followed orders, who retreated when outnumbered, who valued their own survival. This creature was something different. This was a monster wearing human skin, and he did not seem to care if he lived or died. Marcus fought his way toward the transport ship where the children were being held. Vexury soldiers threw themselves at him in desperate waves, but none of them could stop his advance. He killed them with blade and cannon and bare hands. When his ammunition ran out, he used his empty weapon as a club, smashing skulls and breaking bones with savage efficiency. When his blade was knocked from his grip, he tore a Vexury soldier's arm off and used it as a weapon instead. The alien commander finally understood what he was facing. He had read the classified reports about human berserkers, warriors who could enter a state of pure combat fury that made them nearly unstoppable. The reports had seemed exaggerated, the products of frightened survivors trying to explain their losses. Now the commander knew the truth. The reports had actually underestimated them. All units, fall back to the ships. The commander ordered, "Leave the prisoners. Leave everything. We must escape before that thing reaches us." But it was too late. Marcus had reached the transport ship. The guards stationed there opened fire, but he walked through their shots like they were rain. His fists crushed their skulls, and his boots stomped their fallen bodies into the dirt. He tore the door off the transport with his bare hands and stepped inside. The human children screamed when they saw him. He was covered in blood from head to toe, and his eyes were wild with battle madness. For a moment, he did not recognize them as the ones he had come to save. The rage wanted more enemies to kill. It demanded more violence. Then a small girl, no older than 6 years old, looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Please don't hurt us," she whispered. "Please." Something broke through the fog of rage. Marcus blinked, and for a moment, he was himself again. He looked at the children huddled together in fear, and he felt the weight of what he had become. He was a monster, but he was their monster. He was the nightmare that protected them from other nightmares. "I am here to take you home," he said, and his voice cracked with the effort of speaking normally. "Stay behind me. Do not look at what is outside." He led the children out of the transport ship. The battlefield was littered with Vexury bodies, hundreds of them piled in grotesque heaps. The surviving aliens were fleeing toward their ships, no longer interested in conquest. They just wanted to escape from the demon that had destroyed their invasion force. Marcus walked the children back to the facility gate. His wounds were catching up to him now. Blood poured from a dozen injuries, and he could feel his body starting to fail. The Berserker frame had pushed him far beyond human limits, and there would be a price to pay. The other human survivors watched in stunned silence as he approached. They had witnessed the entire battle through the observation cameras. Private Chun was crying. Corporal Williams had fallen to his knees. The facility commanders simply stared, unable to find words for what he had just seen. Marcus handed the children to the waiting medics. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the metal floor. The rage was fading now, leaving behind only exhaustion and pain. He could hear voices around him, people shouting for medical assistance, but it all seemed very far away. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the small girl kneeling beside him. She was holding his bloody hand and saying something he could not quite hear. Her tears fell on his face, warm and gentle, like rain after a long drought. When the rescue ships finally arrived, they found the Vexury forces completely destroyed. The alien invasion had been broken by a single human soldier who refused to let innocent children be taken. The military investigators who examined the battlefield counted over 800 enemy casualties. Most of them had been killed by hand-to-hand combat. Marcus Draven survived his wounds, though the doctors said it should have been impossible. The Berserker frame had damaged his body severely, and he would carry the scars for the rest of his life. But when the children he had saved visited him in the hospital, he smiled for the first time in years. He had become a monster to protect them, and he would do it again without hesitation. The Vexury Empire received the battle reports with growing horror. They had believed humans were soft creatures, easy to conquer once their technology was overcome. Now they understood the terrible truth. Humans were capable of something that no other species in the galaxy possessed. They could transform themselves into engines of destruction through sheer willpower alone. They could become berserkers, and berserkers could not be stopped.